Let's take a look at some of the railroads around Aberdeen, North Carolina. The town has a rich railroad history and was founded as a railroad town and junction along the seaboard back in the 1800s. First up, let's look at the Aberdeen Rockfish. This railroad is one of the oldest continually operating short lines in the United States, and this GP7 here was bought new back in the 1950s and still going strong. Most of the time, the Aberdeen Rockfish operates just switching their transload facility right off the CSX mainline in town. It's hard to catch, and it's infrequent when they do it, maybe once every week or two. But it's fun to watch and easily accessible whenever you can get trackside and watch them do their switching. They've also got a neat little CF7, as well as some other Jeeps, including a GP18 around the railroad. There's two different commodities they switch into the transload facility, and it's all push-pull. There's no run-around moves, but it's kind of interesting to watch. The railroad is pretty quiet between Aberdeen and Rayford, North Carolina, and there are no online customers and no freight moves over that portion of the railroad, even though it was once pretty busy back in the day. So now the railroad only uses this portion of the line for light power moves to and from the shops over to the busier side of the railroad in Fayetteville, North Carolina. It's really hard to catch these light power moves. They happen maybe once a month or so. I've only seen it twice. But it's really cool to see a light engine move across the countryside when you do get to see it. And it's really fun to chase, and it's not very fast, and so it's easy to chase. The railroad generally parallels a local highway, and you can get to different grade crossings and watch them come through. Next, let's talk about the mainline Class 1 action through town. That's CSX's Aberdeen Subdivision, which is the former Seaboard Airline mainline. This is also referred to as the S-Line. Now, this is more of a secondary mainline these days, and the only reliable freight trains are F741 and F742, which is a pair of locals that run between Hamlet and Raleigh, the endpoints of this subdivision. So right there you see 742, which is the northbound local from Hamlet to Raleigh, and it pretty reliably comes through town around 11 in the morning every day. And then its counterpart is 741, which returns down from Raleigh to Hamlet. And a lot of times crews swap trains around Sanford, North Carolina. The two businesses that these two trains work in town are the interchanges with the two short lines in town, the Aberdeen Carolina and Western and the Aberdeen and Rockfish. The Aberdeen Carolina Western interchange yard is a little bit more difficult to access. But you get a front row seat in town of them switching the Aberdeen and Rockfish interchange, and that's usually 741 that will switch the interchange with the Aberdeen and Rockfish in the afternoon. Also on the line you have Amtrak with the Silver Star, and we'll talk about that a little bit later in the video. And there are really a couple of great local spots to hang out in Aberdeen and watch trains go by. A personal favorite of mine is High Octane. It's a coffee shop and an old gas station on South Street and Sycamore Street there in the corner. You get a great vantage point of the trains, and right across the tracks is Railhouse Brewery. It's a great place to enjoy a pint of local beer and sit out on the patio and watch trains go by. And if you get hungry, there's some great local restaurants. Meet Amelia, Mason's, the Workshop Tavern. So when you're out watching trains, make sure you support local business as well. with big old GEs for power. Not what you would normally think of for local power, but it's more and more of a common occurrence on CSX, I suppose, these days. And right there in the background, you can see the headquarters of the Aberdeen Rockfish Railroad Company and one of the restored cabooses in town. Place to watch trains is right up the road in Southern Pines, North Carolina, where the CSX Aberdeen Subdivision cuts right through the middle of downtown. There's a one-way street on either side. It's a really beautiful town. It's you can set up some fun shots. This is where the local Amtrak station is. And also, it's a favorite spot of mine to go get lunch after church and hopefully run into a train. In addition to the locals, there's also rock trains that run from Hamlet to a quarry near Sanford, North Carolina. Now these are unpredictable and not scheduled. I never really figured out when they come through, but they're neat to see when they come through town. Also to the right there, you see a grain train that's being handed off to the Aberdeen, Carolina and Western Railroad at the interchange. So we'll talk about that next. This brings us to which is probably the best looking railroad in town, the Aberdeen, Carolina and Western. This is a former branch line of the original Norfolk Southern that later became the Southern, then the Aberdeen and Briar Patch, and now the Aberdeen, Carolina and Western. And it runs from Aberdeen to Star, North Carolina, and some of the biggest customers are some chicken feed plants out in Candor, North Carolina, where the railroad headquarters is located. As you can see here, they come into town on a sharp curve, descending a really steep hill, coming into the interchange yard there. And it makes for some really interesting photos and video. This is a really interesting tight blind curve. They actually have to get down and flag the crossing before the train comes through. And much to the unamusement of local drivers, it literally cuts the town in half whenever these trains come through. Which is not so bad when you have a shorter local, but when they're pulling a long unit corn train from CSX, it can take quite a while to get through town. Like I said, the hill leaving Aberdeen is really steep for the Aberdeen, Carolina and Western. So if you're chasing a train and you can get ahead of it on Highway 5, it's really fun to get ahead and set up where the hill is real steep and you just get to listen to these SD40-2s work hard. ACWR switches one customer in Aberdeen. That's Reliant Packaging, and they get plastic pellets, I believe. Now, usually the night shift does this work, but if the day shift does it, it's really interesting to see, although the drivers on Highway 5 are usually less than happy about it, because they have to cross the highway to get to that spur right there. The Aberdeen, Carolina and Western also rosters some SD60Fs, former Canadian National. Most of them are in storage up in Star, North Carolina, but this one here makes an appearance from time to time. The railroad stays fairly busy, and it's pretty easy to see moving, but there's not always a pattern to when they're running. There's usually a day crew working over on this side of the railroad, but it depends on what kind of work is needed, whether they're running in Aberdeen, or they're switching in Candor, or they're moving a unit train, or they're using their own power. So if you don't see anything parked in Aberdeen, the best thing to do is just follow the highway and have your scanner on and go over to Candor and see if there's anything moving over in Candor. But sometimes the crew comes in late in the afternoon, sometimes they take off from Aberdeen in the morning. It all just depends on what kind of work needs to be done on the railroad on a given day. This railroad is fun to railfan because there's a lot of easy public access streets that parallel or intersect with the railroad, and it's not too fast, so it's not hard to get ahead of it and chase and see different things. And as long as you're polite, respectful, and stay off railroad property, the crews are usually really friendly and give you a friendly wave as they go on by. ACWR shops also do rebuilding and painting work for other railroads. Last month I got to see these SD40-2s rebuilt for Savage Industries out being test run on the local coming through town. Now, a lot of what you're going to see over here on the Aberdeen, Carolina and Western is actually, you're going to see CSX power, because CSX hands off unit trains of corn for the chicken feed plants in Candor. And so they'll leave the power on these trains, and ACWR crew will take them to Candor and bring them down, usually the next day or two. They unload them pretty quickly. So you'll see CSX power, mostly GE, but sometimes you'll see some interesting EMD power on the trains. And occasionally some foreign road power. There's some really cool old hoppers that a lot of times show up on these trains, but also sometimes they need to use a helper unit to get these trains up the hill. Either they'll break the train in half and double it up the hill, or if they've got the crew available, they'll use one of their own locomotives as a pusher. As you can see here, one's heading back down the hill after helping one of these unit trains get up that steep grade leaving town. Now going back down the hill to the CSX main line, we'll take a look at the last game in town, and that's Amtrak. Trains 91 and 92, the Silver Star. The southbound train comes through after dark, so it's not easy to photograph or video. But the northbound train coming up to South Carolina comes through during the daylight in the summer, and usually in the dark during the winter, but it's late often enough that you can usually get a good shot of it at least once or twice a week. Now the train is running only on the weekends, I believe on Thursdays due to COVID-19, but as a result of that, it is a bigger train. We're seeing 4 or 5 coaches, cafe, diner, 3 sleepers, a couple of locomotives, and baggage. So it's an impressive train now. It was quite a small long-distance train before that. But that's a fun train to get trackside and watch it come through. You'll usually see it in Aberdeen about 10 minutes before its scheduled station stop, Southern North Carolina. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed watching some of these trains coming through my hometown or current hometown of Aberdeen, North Carolina. Thank you very much for watching, and I hope you tune in next time.